A sterile scent of antiseptic clung persistently to the air in the bustling city hospital. Flickering fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a harsh clinical glow upon the cold linoleum floors that stretched endlessly down the corridors. Sarah Hams paced slowly, her bare feet shuffling softly against the smooth surface as she clutched her hospital gown tightly around her slender frame. She was just 24, her eyes bright yet shadowed with a deep unspoken worry that seemed to weigh heavily on her soul. Ahead, the hospital theater's glass doors glistened under the harsh lights, a gleaming gateway to the surgery she so desperately needed. Outside, the city's cacophony, honking cars, distant sirens, and hurried footsteps, was muted here, replaced by the steady beeping of monitors and the rhythmic echo of hurried footsteps on tile. Sarah's heart fluttered with cautious hope despite the sterile chill that seemed to seep into her bones. This was her chance to heal, to reclaim the life that a relentless illness had slowly stolen from her. Yet, beneath the clinical calm lurked a tension she could not shake, a subtle, nagging unease that something was off. The hospital theater was meant to be a sanctuary for healing, a place where life was preserved and restored, but Sarah's instincts whispered a warning she could not ignore. She paused for a moment, inhaling the sharp smell of disinfectant, mixed faintly with the faint scent of latex gloves and the faint metallic tang that always seemed to hang in hospitals. Her hands trembled slightly as she straightened her shoulders, steeling herself for what lay beyond those doors. Sarah's days were a delicate, exhausting balance between work, study, and managing her fragile health. As a promising law student, she often retreated into the pages of dense legal texts, finding solace in the silent wisdom of the written word while her body betrayed her with waves of fatigue and pain. Raised in a modest but loving home by her father, Judge Marcus Hams, Sarah had learned early on the unyielding power of justice and resilience. Marcus was a man of unwavering principle, his courtroom a place where fairness was not a question but a command, yet the world beyond the bench was often brutal and unforgiving. Despite the relentless challenges, Sarah's spirit remained unbroken. Her friends admired her quiet courage, her rare ability to smile through the pain that gnawed at her from within. She often visited her father's chambers, sitting quietly as he spoke with measured authority, absorbing the weight of his words and the dignity of his presence. But in this hospital, in this sterile moment, that strength was being tested in ways she had never imagined. The walls around her seemed colder, the voices quieter, and the shadows longer. Sarah closed her eyes briefly, recalling the warmth of her father's embrace and the steady rhythm of his voice, a grounding force in the turbulence of her life. The surgeon, a middle-aged man with a tight-lipped expression and sharp eyes that seemed to pierce through her, glanced at Sarah with an unsettling coldness as he reviewed her chart. "We can't schedule your operation today," he said curtly, avoiding any direct eye contact. "There are other patients ahead of you." His tone was clipped, final, as if her presence was an inconvenient interruption. Sarah's brow furrowed, confusion mixing with frustration. The delay was infuriating but not unheard of in a busy hospital, she reminded herself. Yet, as she glanced around the room, she noticed the uneven glances from staff, the whispered comments that abruptly died when she entered. It was more than just bureaucracy. The air thickened with an unspoken barrier, a wall she could neither see nor break. The sterile lighting seemed harsher, the murmurs sharper, and the distance between her and care growing wider. Later small moments compounded, the nurse's hesitation when she reached for her hand, a doctor's averted gaze when their eyes briefly met, tiny but telling signs that piled into a suffocating weight. Sarah felt the sting of exclusion, of being seen not as a patient needing help, but as a problem to be managed. The hospital theater, a place meant for healing and hope, had become a fortress she was barred from entering, its doors shut tight against her silent pleas. News traveled fast in the hospital corridors, whispered behind closed doors and carried in hurried footsteps. When Sarah's father, Judge Marcus Hams, arrived unexpectedly, the atmosphere shifted palpably. He was a towering figure of authority, his presence commanding respect even in this sterile environment filled with clinical detachment. Yet the doctors who had denied Sarah access stiffened visibly, unaware of the weight his name carried. Marcus's voice was calm but firm as he approached the head surgeon, his tone carrying the unmistakable authority of a courtroom. "I understand my daughter's surgery has been delayed indefinitely. I need to understand why." His eyes searched theirs, sharp as a judge's gavel, demanding truth and accountability. The room seemed to shrink under the weight of his gaze. The room fell silent, tension crackling like electricity through the sterile air. The truth, long buried beneath layers of prejudice and denial, now hovered exposed. Sarah's fight was no longer just for her health. It was a battle against the very walls that sought to exclude her, against a system that masked bias beneath protocol. Marcus's presence breathed new life into the struggle, making it clear that this injustice would not go unchallenged. Sarah sat beside her father in the hospital's waiting area, the sterile scent mingling with the faint aroma of freshly brewed coffee drifting from the nearby kiosk. The soft murmur of other patients and the distant clang of elevator bells created a muted soundtrack to their quiet determination. Marcus's calm, unwavering gaze bolstered her courage, a steady beacon in the storm of uncertainty. "We won't let this slide," he assured her quietly, his voice low but resolute. Determined, Marcus requested a formal review of hospital policies regarding patient treatment, pushing for transparency and fairness. Sarah's voice, though soft, carried a newfound strength as she spoke directly to hospital administration. "No one should be denied care because of their race," she said firmly, eyes meeting theirs without flinching, her words echoing in the sterile room. The hospital staff exchanged uneasy glances, the challenge laid bare before them. A reckoning was coming. Sarah's resolve ignited a spark, a call for justice within the walls that had seemed impenetrable. The theater doors, once shut in her face, now symbolized a deeper fight for dignity and equality, a fight she was ready to lead. The hospital's response was tepid, cloaked in bureaucratic jargon and vague promises that felt like thin veils over deeper issues. Some doctors whispered behind closed doors, their discomfort palpable, voices low and guarded. "We have protocols," one muttered, "but this complicates things." The words hung in the air, a subtle admission of resistance masked by procedure. Sarah's frustration grew with every passing day. The subtle racism she faced was entrenched, woven into the hospital's very fabric like an invisible chain. Staff avoided eye contact, schedules mysteriously shifted without explanation, and excuses multiplied like shadows lengthening at dusk. The theater remained out of reach, a haunting reminder of prejudice's quiet yet persistent power. Yet Sarah and her father refused to back down. Marcus's legal expertise transformed scrutiny into pressure, demanding accountability at every turn. The hospital, caught between its fragile reputation and internal resistance, faced a storm it could no longer ignore. Sarah's fight was becoming a catalyst for change, rippling through the institution with increasing force. In the midst of the struggle, an unlikely ally emerged from the shadows. Dr. Lillian Grant, a compassionate surgeon with a reputation for fairness and integrity, approached Sarah quietly one afternoon. "I've seen what's happening," she said, voice low but earnest, her eyes reflecting genuine concern. "It's wrong. I want to help." Her words were a lifeline in the sea of isolation. Their conversations grew deeper, filled with shared hopes and whispered strategies carefully exchanged in hushed tones. Dr. Grant's presence brought a glimmer of light to the oppressive atmosphere, a reminder that not everyone was blind to injustice. Sarah found herself opening up, her fears tempered by the warmth of newfound support. Together they planned to confront the hospital board, armed with evidence, testimonies, and unyielding determination. It was more than a fight for surgery. It was a battle for equality, for respect, for the very soul of a place meant to heal all who walked through its doors. Days blurred into nights as Sarah juggled hospital visits, legal meetings, and the precarious balance of her own health. The weight of injustice pressed heavily upon her, but within grew an unshakable resolve. She refused to be defined by exclusion or silence. In quiet moments, she reflected deeply on her father's lessons, the power of standing firm, of speaking truth even when the world seemed deaf. Her courage deepened, no longer just for herself, but for others who might face similar walls in the future. The hospital theater was a battleground, but also a crucible, forging her strength and purpose. Sarah's voice, once tentative and frail, now carried the clear, unwavering tone of conviction. She was no longer a silent victim, but a beacon demanding change, her spirit unbroken, her hope fierce and relentless. The hospital's resistance escalated, veiling discrimination beneath layers of policy and procedure like a smokescreen. Sarah's surgery was canceled yet again, the latest excuse more blatant and cruel. "We cannot risk complications," the surgeon claimed, his eyes cold and dismissive. Frustration exploded into despair as Sarah's body weakened under the strain, but her spirit flared brighter than ever. "This is about more than me," she declared passionately in a tense meeting with hospital leadership. "It's about justice, dignity, and the very principles my father stands for." Her words echoed boldly, piercing the sterile room. Tensions soared as the hospital board convened under mounting pressure. Behind closed doors, the truth of racial bias was laid bare, forcing a confrontation that could no longer be ignored. The theater doors remained closed for now, but the battle had reached a critical and irrevocable turning point. The fallout was immediate and far-reaching. Media outlets caught wind of the story, casting a harsh, unforgiving light on the hospital's troubling practices. Public outcries swelled, voices rising in demand for accountability and reform. Internally, divisions cracked the institution's carefully maintained facade. Marcus's courtroom experience guided Sarah through complex legal channels, filing formal complaints that demanded transparency and justice. Dr. Grant rallied colleagues, advocating persistently for meaningful reform. The hospital theater, once a symbol of exclusion and prejudice, now stood at the center of a growing movement for change. Sarah's health teetered precariously on the edge, but the true victory was in the fight itself, a testament to resilience, courage, and the transformative power of raising one's voice. The theater doors, though still closed, no longer represented defeat, but the promise of a new beginning. With the hospital board scheduled for a critical and potentially decisive hearing, Sarah and her allies prepared meticulously. Documents lined the table in neat piles. Testimonies were rehearsed repeatedly. The hospital theater's policies were dissected and scrutinized, exposing fault lines and inconsistencies. Sarah's resolve was steady, her mind sharp despite the anxiety churning within her like a storm. Her father's calm presence offered strength, a reminder that justice was not a sprint but a marathon demanding endurance and patience. The anticipation crackled palpably in the sterile hospital air, the theater's locked doors standing as silent witnesses to the struggle. This confrontation would decide more than just her surgery. It would challenge a system built on silence, exclusion, and denial. The boardroom was charged with tension, filled with hospital executives, legal representatives, and Sarah's small but determined team. Sarah stepped forward, her voice clear, unwavering, and filled with conviction. "I stand here not just for myself, but for every patient denied care because of their race," she declared boldly. Evidence was presented. Charts, testimonies, internal memos revealing bias and discrimination in stark detail. Dr. Grant's heartfelt testimony pierced through the defenses, her voice trembling with emotion yet resolute. The room crackled with raw emotion. The sterile walls echoed with calls for justice and change. The hospital's leadership, cornered by truth and public scrutiny, faced a reckoning long overdue. The theater doors, once a barrier to hope and healing, now symbolized the possibility of transformation and redemption. In the weeks following the hearing, the hospital implemented sweeping reforms. New policies emphasized equity and transparency. Diversity and sensitivity training became mandatory for all staff. The theater doors, once shut tight against Sarah, opened at last for her surgery, a powerful symbol of hard-won progress and hope. Sarah lay on the operating table, the sterile room now transformed into a place of hope and healing. Her father stood nearby, pride and relief etched deeply on his face as he held her hand gently. The surgery was a success, but more importantly, a message had been sent, a message that discrimination would no longer be tolerated. The hospital, scarred but healing, began a journey toward true inclusivity. Sarah's courage had sparked change, a testament to resilience, justice, and the power to transform even the coldest, most unyielding halls. Months later, Sarah walked confidently through the hospital corridors, now a volunteer advocate for patient rights and equity. The theater doors behind her stood wide open, welcoming all who needed care regardless of background. Her health restored, her spirit stronger than ever, she carried a quiet joy that radiated from within. Judge Marcus Hams watched his daughter with immense pride, knowing her fight had reshaped the world around her and inspired countless others. In the city's heart, a place once divided by prejudice now pulsed with hope and possibility. Sarah's journey, marked by pain, courage, and unwavering justice, was far from over. But as the golden sun streamed through the hospital windows, it illuminated a future where dignity and healing walked hand in hand, lighting the way for generations to come.